Today Sports Central will be going over a college football game preview and prediction on the game of the week coming up in the ACC in Week 13, and that's going to be between Notre Dame and North Carolina. Both these teams are in the top 25, and Notre Dame is in the pole position in the ACC right now as they have an 8-0 record, and they beat Clemson a couple of weeks ago, so they're in a really good position right now in the ACC. Meanwhile, for North Carolina, they're currently 4th in the ACC. They're kind of on the outside looking in, but they're definitely back on the rise. This is going to be big for them. Considering North Carolina's got a decent amount of momentum right now, and then Notre Dame on the other side, of course, with Ian Book at quarterback. All of them are looking really good right now. They're definitely in a great position to be in the college football playoff, especially if they can win their last couple of games coming up. And this is going to be a crucial game for both these teams. We're going to be going over a full game preview and prediction on this one here today, starting out with your team trends. Last game, Notre Dame beat Boston College 45-31 was their final score there, and of course, Notre Dame back on November 7th beat Clemson. That was definitely their signature win of the season so far. 47-40 was the final score. They actually beat them in double overtime too, so that's definitely the game of the season, I would say, so far. And that was quite a matchup there. Of course, Clemson now has Trevor Lawrence back, so that's going to be huge for them. And it's going to be interesting to see because I'm pretty sure we're going to see Notre Dame and Clemson in the ACC championship game. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not Notre Dame can beat Clemson again, as Clemson is more than likely going to have Trevor Lawrence back at quarterback. So, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting finish to the ACC, that is for sure. But for North Carolina, they beat Wake Forest in a shootout, 59-53 was the final score there. That was a crazy game there between both of those teams, but North Carolina got the win in the end. That's really all that matters. Winning streaks for both these teams: Notre Dame is 8-0 with a 8-game winning streak, and then North Carolina is 6-2 with a 2-game winning streak. So, of course, North Carolina had a really rough stretch there at the end of October. They lost 2 of their last 3 games in that month. They lost to Florida State, and they also lost to Virginia. But then again, I mean, both of those losses had a combined loss total of 6 points. They only lost both those games by a combined total of 6 points. I mean, both of those games were really close. They just were, they just had really bad finishes for North Carolina in the end. So, I mean, North Carolina is still a great team. They just had a rough stretch there at the end of October. But this game is to be on Friday, November 27th, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. So it will be a Black Friday game in Chapel Hill. So North Carolina will be your home team here. Spread currently says Notre Dame by 4. ESPN FPI's got Notre Dame 71%. And then Vegas prediction 27-20 is the current prediction towards Notre Dame. So Notre Dame is favored here in all 3 areas, which really is not much of a surprise considering Notre Dame is the 2nd-ranked team in the nation right now. But it is close. North Carolina is not far behind in the spread or the ESPN FPI. Do keep that in mind moving forward. But here's your stat comparison for this game. Notre Dame's got 37 points per game, 16 points allowed. They got 228 pass yards a game, 233 rush yards, and then 219 pass yards allowed, and then 85 rush yards allowed per game so far. For North Carolina, they got 43 points per game, 30 points allowed. They got 329 average pass yards per game, so that really shows how well Sam Howell has been for this team this season. And then he also got 233 rush yards a game, then 261 yards allowed for passing, then 151 for rushing. So all around, both these teams are doing really well in both areas statistically. I mean, if you look at Ian Book, I mean, he's had a great season so far as he's got nearly 2,000 yards on the season with 11 touchdowns and only 1 interception. He's only thrown 1 pick this season, which is huge for Notre Dame. I think that's a big reason why they've been so successful, is because their turnover margin is very limited. They have not turned over the ball a lot, which is huge for any team, and especially for Notre Dame, it's really showed. But for North Carolina, they got Sam Howell, of course, their quarterback. He's played very, very well. Honestly, you could make an argument that he's the best quarterback, or one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. I mean, the ACC's got a lot of great quarterbacks. You got Ian Book, you got Sam Howell, you got Derek King with Miami, you got Trevor Lawrence with Clemson. All around, the ACC's got some really good quarterbacks this season, and a lot of these guys are, like, especially Ian Book, he's probably going to be going on to the NFL draft. Trevor Lawrence will be too, so we're going to see a lot of great quarterbacks moving on after this season in the ACC. But this has actually been a pretty talented conference this season. Like, I mean, going into the season, especially looking back at 2019, the ACC was easily the worst conference in college football. I'd consider them to be worse than the Pac-12, but this season, yeah, this conference has got a lot of talent, and these 2 teams here are definitely great examples of that. I mean, yeah, North Carolina, Sam Howell's been a great quarterback, and he's still young, by the way. Like, he's got 23 touchdowns and 6 interceptions on the season, which is a great touchdown to interception ratio for as young of a quarterback as he is. So you got to watch out for that. But Notre Dame is in contention for the college football playoff. There's no doubt about that right now. I mean, Notre Dame completely controls their own destiny at this point. They just got to play Clemson in the ACC championship, and they'll likely be on their way. Like, if Notre Dame beats Clemson for the second time this season, honestly, I would not be surprised to see Notre Dame get the 1 seed in the college football playoff. But, I mean, yeah, you just got to get to that point first. Like, this is not going to be an easy game to get past for the Fighting Irish. I mean, North Carolina is a very good team, and a lot of people kind of forgot about them after their rough stretch through October. But let me remind you, once again, they only lost to Virginia and Florida State by a combined 6 points. They barely lost those games. North Carolina is still a very talented team that is not to be slept on. I think the Tar Heels are easily one of the best teams in the ACC too. Don't forget about that. So they're definitely back on the rise after those 2 pretty terrible games at the end of October. But I mean, yeah, both teams include a couple of the best quarterbacks in the nation. There's no doubt about that with Sam Howell and Ian Book. Both these quarterbacks are great all around, and a couple of really good rushers too. You can't forget about both of these guys, like Williams on both sides. I mean, if you look at, Notre Dame. Notre Dame's been a big rushing team as well this season. You can't forget about that. So both teams are really good offensively and defensively. It's been huge for both teams so far. And then again, this is a very important game for both these teams. If you look at North Carolina, I'd probably say their chances of making the college bowl playoff are pretty much squandered by now. If you look at the ECC situation, you got Notre Dame and Clemson pretty much at the top of the conference, and Miami is kind of on the outside looking in, but Notre Dame and Clemson are probably your 2 teams that will be representing the ACC in the championship game. But, once again, this is an important game, especially for North Carolina. If they can get a win here, that's going to set their program up to have a great finish to the season. That's going to give them a lot of momentum. It'll probably put them in a great bowl game too, so don't forget about that. But for Notre Dame on the flip side, if you lose this game, your chances of making it to the college football playoff are really diminished. If you look at Notre Dame, the odds of them beating Clemson for the second time are already pretty low. Then again, if you lose to North Carolina, that's going to be rough for Notre Dame. So, this is going to be a huge game for them, especially if they're wanting to make it to the college football playoff, which in the end, I've got Notre Dame getting the win here in a close one. This is going to be a nail-biter for both teams. Halftime score is going to be 17-10. Notre Dame's going to lead it in the final. It's going to be a 7-point win, a 1-touchdown win for Notre Dame. Final score 34-27. I've got the Fighting Irish getting the win, but it's going to be close. I think North Carolina is going to make this a back-and-forth game. We're going to see both teams trade blows, and I think both teams are definitely going to be leading for a good chunk of this game. And I think your probability is going to be 65% towards Notre Dame. So I'm pretty confident Notre Dame will win here, but there is still a pretty good chance that we do see the Tar Heels pull a big upset here. But then again, I still think Notre Dame, Ian Book is too good of a quarterback. I think Notre Dame ends up getting the win here in the end. But do let me know your thoughts and comments below on this matchup. Let me know all your score predictions, all that down below. And yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. If you enjoyed this preview, slap a like on it, and I will see you all later.